Hello, Ivar from Enslaved. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So we're here at Rock City in Nottingham. You're supporting Opeth on tour. How's it been going so far? Is there kind of a good vibe on the buses and stuff, and backstage and whatever?
Yeah, it's really good. We've known the guys for I don't know, like a decade, pretty much. We toured with them the first time in 2009, but we knew them from before that too. We started out pretty much around the same time in the early 90s, and we've seen them rise to the stars, so to speak. They're probably the biggest band that we can call in our genre. So being invited to come along is fantastic. They have a great crowd, and they have a very open-minded crowd. So we've been getting some very awesome responses. It leaves us humble to be able to show our music to this many new people. And of course, it's nice to be around people that are professional at the same time, very friendly and into the same things, same kind of lame humor.
Yeah. Speak a little bit about the genre, because it's quite unorthodox, isn't it? It's not particularly. I suppose there's not a lot of bands that do that kind of thing. What was it that opened your eyes to that? And so not just kind of rock or more metal or whatever. It's kind of this new world, I guess. It's kind of this kind of fantasy. What is that? What was the sort of the thrill of that to you, would you say?
I think we started out, we were pretty much like Opeth, very focused on the metal bit. But we were listening to quite a few things outside, and I guess what I experienced was wanting to have other sources of inspiration. It just felt like it becomes very easily sort of musically cannibalistic if you're just listening to the same kind of music that you're writing and performing yourself. So I guess that's the threshold, is to go from just listening to other things and being able to incorporate it into the stuff that you're actually writing. And I think that was a big awakening towards the end of the 90s, being able to include the favorite bands, the prog rock and everything, into the actual enslaved music. It's a big thing for us.
So if there's influences from all over, I suppose, is there anything sort of kind of popular, like I know you've spoken about Pink Floyd being a sort of a big influence before, things like that. Did that ever kind of come into it? And obviously you started the band when you were very young, you're a teenager, so was there kind of much time to listen to that kind of sort of more mainstream music, or was it straight into that? And just talk to me about it.
Yeah, it's Pink Floyd's been there all the time. You mentioning them, they're probably my favorite band, and they were there all the way from the beginning. And I think there was a few years, how mono-focused you can become when you're a teenager. So obviously this kind of extreme metal was very taking most of the focus for a while. But again, I guess after a few years, as I said, we started going back into the other things that we were already listening to and exploring. And today I would say, metal is probably the main genre still for us. But I would say more than half of the other music I'm listening to is still, I guess, music that you could call not metal related.
Yeah. Okay. I mentioned it a minute ago. You as a band have been going for a long time now. So that's since the early 90s, as you mentioned. What's kind of is there ever a point where you kind of see things differently, where you get to a stage and you think, wow, this really has, this is my life now? And then I guess, how does it feel to have been in a band for sort of like 26 years?
Yeah, it's always fun to have those when you get a bit of a perspective, I guess. I think like being on the road now Nottingham, I think this is the first time we've been here. But some places on the tours that we go, we were already on the first tour back in '95, and when things like that happen, it gives you a bit of perspective. And it's also fun because when you go back and think about how you viewed things back then, didn't really think about it in those terms. You didn't think like, okay, this might be a full-time thing in the future or anything. You were just concerned with the next gig or trying to get a record deal. I think that's we were lucky, and those bands who endure those first few years, I think you have to have that kind of mindset where you don't define. It's way too early to start defining like career goals and stuff like that, because it just takes away from the naivety I think you need to have. Should avoid.
So you've just released your new album, this year. How did that go down? Is it always kind of unnerving when you've got a new album, you've written it, and then you don't know how it might be received by fans, or is that kind of worry off the shoulders now? Because you know that fans will somehow stick with it if they maybe prefer the older stuff or whatever. But how's it gone anyway? How's the reception been?
It's been really good. First, there was a few months of really positive buzz within, I guess, the industry, with the people who heard it. And the journalists who had an early listen to it had some really strong feedback, and it's been the same from the audience. I have to say, I don't think I've seen this level of enthusiasm for many years. I'm thinking like maybe back 2003, 2004. Wow. Since it feels, a lot of people mention that too. It feels like a new start for the band. So I guess it's natural with a little bit of lineup changes and everything. What you asked about. If it's nerve-wracking with reception, yeah, it always is. It doesn't help, like, this is the 14th album and it's still the same. Yeah. Those few weeks after you release it and wait for the feedback to come back from, like, the non-professional, just like the listeners, that's always really scary. And so, because it doesn't mean you can have the best reviews and then you can have a disappointed fan base, or the other way around. And for me, it's always really exciting, and I guess sometimes even scary. But I have to admit, like, but that's all it is. I would still keep on going and do the same thing. I would be disappointed, but it doesn't really affect how I relate to it. I would just notice the discrepancy between my own experience of it and how other people feel about it. That's life. Sometimes you can't, if you start up doubting your own enthusiasm for something because other people don't like it, you get into some weird territory, I think. So you have to stick with your guns. Either you're happy with it yourself or you're not.
That's a great answer. What's next then? What's next then for the band? And are you sort of in processes of recording already, or writing? Because obviously you get a lot done in over the time. What's the plan? Obviously you've got this tour, and then what's next?
After the UK run, we go back and finish up in Europe with a week or two of headlining. We go to Russia. That's the last thing we do this year. Do some shows there, and then next year we have both 70,000 tons of metal, I think it's called, the metal cruise, and then week after that we go and do a month of headlining on the Decibel tour, and then we're sort of getting the dates all sorted now, but we're going to be doing South America, Japan, possibly Australia, a run in Europe, a run in Scandinavia, Norway, where we're from, and all that's going to happen next year in together with the festivals. So it's going to be a busy year.
And are you always sort of writing and making new music, sort of even now, so like on the bus and whatever? Are you always kind of chipping away at like ideas for the next sort of release?
Always, yeah. It's either for the next Enslaved release or some of my side projects or something, or there's. Right now I'm in the process of doing what I do on off days on this tour, is I record bits and pieces in hotel rooms with my guitar for an album with a different project for next year and so on. So I guess when that's done, then I'm pretty sure I'm going to start writing Enslaved again.
Amazing. One final question. It's sort of a question I ask to every musical act I interview. One, musician or multi-instrumentalist or vocalist even, or just anyone musical that is sort of the one for you, the top one, if you can name one sort of outright influence, who would it be?
I think these days, I think David Gilmour is good to mention. He's always been up there, but particularly now, last thing I did before going on tour was watching his return to Pompeii cinema concert back home. And just realized, he's the, the quiet desperation is the English way, as they sing on Dark Side of the Moon. And he's, with Roger Waters being very vocal and very political, he's taken up a lot of space, sort of, in our public opinion. And it's easy to forget that you have that quiet, sort of, the quiet side of the Pink Floyd genius too, in David Gilmour. So, pretty much him, yeah. He can do anything. His leads, his mellow acoustic pieces, his vocals, it's just fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Thank you very much for chatting with us. Have a great show.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers. Thank you very much. That was